So this week we talked about the equipment that is required for opening an ice cream or frozen dairy, non-dairy manufacturing facility, and some of the pluses and minuses behind buying new and used equipment and what kinds of equipment you can consider buying new or used. Next week we are going to talk about utility requirements and some of the things that you're going to want to think about when leasing out a building and maybe some of the modifications that you might have to make to that building. Also, we are looking for professionals in the THC infused food category. That includes professionals like attorneys, accountants, all the way down to infusers and people on the agricultural side. There's a lot of you out there who have been in this edibles business for quite some time, and we would love to have you on the show. Please reach out to us if you are interested at Safe THC Foods on Twitter or on our website at thethcfoodie.com.
Hey podcast listener, this is the THC Foodie, where you can get the scoop on the business of THC infused foods. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, check out the thcfoodie.com and icecreamprivatelabel.com.
You talk in your article about the equipment that's required and some of the factors involved with deciding what kind of equipment that you want to purchase. But what I want to talk a little bit more about today is you mentioned in your article how you can consider buying new and used equipment. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what kinds of equipment you can buy new and what kind of equipment that you can buy used.
We'll go from manual equipment to automated equipment. So if you are going to be a manual operation, again, we talked about a batch freezer, depending on the age and depending on what it was previously making, then I would say that you could look for a used batch freezer. My guess is you're not going to like it and you're probably going to buy new. With the assumption that you're buying that piece new, some other items that are going to be important are shelving, tables, smallwares. You could buy a lot of those online. You can buy a lot of those used. You can go to auctions. You can go to Restaurant Supply. Sometimes these folks have a used section. You need a freezer, a blast freezer. I have found some wonderful less than 5-year-old blast freezers used, and you're probably saving 50-60% of the original price. One thing about commercial equipment in the food category is it depreciates very quickly. What I recommend to folks on used equipment, if they're buying it from a company and they're going to back the equipment, and we're talking about used, then that's safe. You can buy it sight unseen, have pictures taken, you could get the year of it and all of that. If you're buying from an individual, I would suggest that you see it in operation before you buy it, because it's on eBay or Craigslist or something. It's possible that once you pay the money and get this piece of equipment, if there's an issue with it, it's an as-is sale in many cases. I would say buyer beware when they're buying from an individual. So typically I would say buy from a company. I've purchased used equipment from companies before. Indeed, there was a problem with it. Service technician came over, an authorized service technician, and there was a problem with the equipment, and the company I bought it from backed it up.
If we're talking about a manual plant, which pieces of equipment you would buy used or try to buy used, and which pieces of equipment you would not buy used and you would buy new?
In a manual plant, I would buy a new batch freezer. I would look for a used blast 2-door freezer, an upright cooler, refrigerator. You can look for used, but I really think that the refrigerator needs to be a pretty big space. So in many cases, I have someone look for a small walk-in cooler, and that I would buy new. Other than that, you have tables, chairs, you have, small mixing bowls and all of these. And you can buy a lot of these very reasonable on the internet. So if you can find them used, you get a stainless steel table that was $300, you can buy it for $75. But in many cases, you could buy a brand new one for $125. So the more you can buy new in those type of items, it's easier and it's just cleaner and it just looks better. If you do see auctions in your area, maybe an ice cream plant's closing up, I think it's nice to go there because you have an opportunity to buy some things that you normally wouldn't buy. If you're a semi-automated plant, then the only difference from what I said was you would add a filler, a semi-automatic filler, and that will probably be a new item. And the reason I say that is because people that typically have these stay with these. They don't get rid of them. So I would say that would be a new item. And that now puts you with your batch freezer, semi-automatic filler, and now you have your blast freezer, you have your walk-in cooler, and it gives you the opportunity to make product for at least a year, depending on the volume or how well you're promoting your product. When you're talking about an automated plant, you're talking about going from a batch freezer to a continuous freezer. Those freezers you would typically have to buy new, and I would probably advise you to buy new. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of mechanics and moving parts and sensitive electronics with these machines. And so they've been used. They've been really used hard, even if they're 10 years old. So sometimes maybe you're spending an extra $20,000 and you get a brand new freezer with a warranty. It's going to meet your demands for a variety of years to come. That's what I typically recommend. There's going to be a tank required. The tank, I would say you could buy used. And the tank is where you're going to put your mix. This tank needs to have a jacket for refrigeration and also for heating. You need a variety of pumps in your facility. I would say that I would probably buy new pumps. You might end up spending a couple $1,000s more, but a pump is a critical piece of your plant. Keep in mind, some of the reasons I may be suggesting that you buy new is because you're not large enough to have a full-time maintenance person. So if you're a large facility, you have a full-time maintenance person that's tweaking and fixing and repairing all day long. But if there's a couple of you in this facility, then the opportunity for new is that you get the factory support and it's under warranty. Besides the tank and the pumps and the continuous freezer, you now have a filler. And the filler is going to dispense the product into a cup. Let me start at the beginning. It's going to drop the cup, fill the cup, it can seal the cup, and it can lid the cup. It will also inkjet the cup, date code, Best Buy, plant number, whatever you want to put on there. And then it continues down the conveyor. So in the case of the filler, there's sometimes where the cup manufacturer will lease this piece of equipment to you. In fact, for some manufacturers, the filler is not even available for sale. Fillers tend to be very expensive because they're custom made. On a small cup filler automated, you could spend $125,000. In some instances, depending on your volume, you could be spending $500 a month in a perpetual lease for this equipment. So there's a big opportunity. I'm not suggesting that every cup company will honor the lease for you, because at the end of the day, they want to sell their packaging. And if you're someone that's using 1,000 cups a week, chances are they're not going to be interested in you paying the lease, because again, they're going to have $80, $90, $100,000 tied up in this filler. You can buy a used filler. They're out there. But if you are going to buy a used piece of equipment filler, what I would suggest is that in that process, you would call the manufacturer of that piece and say, I'm looking at this filler. Is there an authorized service agent in my area? And if there is, then I would recommend that this is someone that you contact to look at this piece of equipment, because they're going to be adjusting it, setting it for what you want. Maybe the filler that you're buying was filling quart containers and you're filling pints. So right there, we need the tooling to convert to a pint cup, and we need to make adjustments for that cup. So these fillers, I would say that in response to your question, could probably more than likely be a used piece of equipment because of the cost factor of new. Conveyors, you could get used. If you're going to have an automated plant, then you're going to have a walk-in freezer, blast freezer, and you're going to have a walk-in cooler. you have a blast freezer, which is a walk-in freezer. And the way you can order those is you're going to tell the manufacturer the size. I have a 10 by 20 space. Okay. So they will come out and they will actually build the walls. They're 4-foot panels, and they will erect these foam walls, ceiling, put the equipment in, and hook up. However, depending on the space you're in, even particularly in some cases, your freezer box or refrigeration box is outside the building, but the door is coming through the wall. So you're not tying up space inside your building. In many cases, there are companies that you say, I want this 8 by 10 box, and they actually deliver it to you already made up. So there's no building of this box. So there's two types that you can get. Nevertheless, you need a walk-in cooler, 38, 40 degrees, and you need a blast freezer, minus 20, minus 25 degrees. Those are typically new. So there's the difference between the three categories of automatic, semi-automatic, or manual.
Going with that, you are saying that I can buy some of my equipment used. If I'm going to buy my equipment used, where do I look for this stuff? I mean, is it on Craigslist? And I find it just by Googling it, and I just need to know the name of the equipment? Or should I be going to dairies? Should I be looking for old ice cream manufacturing facilities? Where will I find this used equipment?
If you do a search for a used continuous freezer, there's a variety of companies that are going to pop up that are in the business of either hosting auctions or they've attended auctions and they're buying a tremendous amount of used equipment. These folks will then, at the time of selling it, will refurbish it on their site and they will sell it used. So there's a variety of companies. I'd say right off the bat, a handful, 5, 6 that are very popular. They get a lot of equipment, all size equipment. They have, you name the equipment, they have it. However, the key is again, and I'm going to go back to the continuous freezer. I've been in some situations where I found some continuous freezers that were about $20,000. They were 10 years old. However, I stayed away from them because of the product that they were making. So they were, in my opinion, they were used very hard and they were probably on the downside of their life. Now, most of those parts are replaceable, motors and such, but it's very expensive. So, you could spend $5,000 on a motor that burns out, and there's clutch and all of these things. So you can find it on the internet. You can also, there's some auction houses that you can get on their list. They're going to say that we're going to be in so-and-so dairy in Arkansas and come on out, and you can go out there and you can see what they have. So it is pretty easy to find. I would say that I would have people stay away from a broker. I would suggest that they go right to someone that owns this used equipment and has refurbished it and has a short warranty on it, maybe 30 days, maybe 15 days. I would suggest that people that want to find equipment need to find equipment that may be made in the States, serviced in the States when you're dealing with used equipment. If you're dealing with some Italian equipment, it's very good equipment. The challenge is all of the parts are sitting in Italy. There's a problem with it, even though it's a great price. You don't know if some of the modular panels in there are replaceable with a replacement that you can get locally or somewhere in the United States. Sometimes you got to be careful of the way that the motors are wired for power. In many cases, I would tell a client to stay away from that because I think within 6 months, 8 months, a year, if there's a problem, there could be longer downtime than necessary for a repair situation. Nothing more distracting than you're in the middle of working your plant and you had a great deal on a particular piece of equipment and the motor burns out after 6 months. You might lose a day, 2 days of manufacturing over this motor. You got to find someone to fix it. That person's got to identify the motor. If it's not local, they have to have it flown in. Then the repair person comes back. Then they got to install it. So in the meantime, you're trying to stay in business. So you got to be real careful about some of this equipment. On the automated plant, there's a control panel that's probably custom made. There's also stainless steel tubing that needs to be installed, and that's new. You don't buy used stainless steel tubing and have someone weld that for your plant. So in recapping, you've probably heard me say in all three scenarios, the word new more than used. I would say that is the upfront investment is going to save you a lot of nickel and diming repairs in the long run. You'll be happier.
Do you have a product or business you want to share? We want to know what you have to say. Leave us a comment on our website at thethhcfoodie.com or on Twitter at SafeTHCFoods.